This is Audible. From the series and Volume 1 of The Unseen City, Salazar'S Touch. The Dream House. The Dream House by Kevin B. At TD Bank, Kenneth Bassa stood out among his colleagues. Like 70% of the workforce, he was an immigrant, yet he refused to blend in or conform. Instead, he openly celebrated his African and Ghanaian heritage, making it an essential part of his professional identity. Rather than wearing the traditional suit and tie expected of every banker, Kenneth insisted on donning custom-made African attire. His outfits were so vibrant and distinctive that colleagues often referred to him as the Rainbow Man. The bold colors stood out even more against his dark skin, and his long limbs gave him the stature of a natural model. Instead of opting for a typical lunch or grabbing a meal from a nearby restaurant, Kenneth consistently brought African dishes to the office, often meals that required eating with his hands. His favorite was koki corn, which he explained to his colleagues as Ghana's version of tamales. The skeptical glances in the break room never bothered him, whether it was the scent of palm oil or the rich spices that put them off. He never cared to ask. Eating with his hands was part of his culture, and he believed it made food taste better. Whenever co-workers complained about the sight of him eating without utensils or the unfamiliar aroma of his food in the microwave, he stood his ground. During his first few months at the bank, his wardrobe and culinary choices made him a frequent subject of HR complaints. His colleagues struggled to adjust to his peculiarities, but over time, they learned to tolerate them. Kenneth Bassa was as proud a Ghanaian as they came. However, in every non-food-related aspect, he was a perfectly assimilated Canadian, polite to a fault and eager to avoid conflict. He understood the value of a corporate job and even went so far as to learn ice skating and hockey just to fit in. The bruises and sore muscles paid off when he finally got to showcase his skills at a work event, relishing the moment he could impress his colleagues. His parents quickly joined him in his new hobby, but not his older brother and only sibling, Junior Bassa. A paramedic by day and an aspiring movie star by night, Junior was the loud, protective, and rebellious one. He effortlessly balanced two contrasting lifestyles, which made him immensely popular. The Bassa brothers were known for their strong personalities and solid reputations, yet Junior's antics always stole the spotlight. Despite this, Kenneth rarely made major moves without first consulting his brother. So, it was no surprise that Junior was the first person he thought to call when he spotted a foreclosure file on Ms. Leon Perron's desk labeled Emmett Road. The property was love at first sight. It sat on 3 acres of land, with an additional acre bordering a vast, untouched 16-acre woodland. Cumberland was gradually falling to the urban sprawl of Orleans, with new developments appearing every 6 months. Yet, properties with such generous forested backdrops were still rare, and Kenneth was determined to claim this one. Unlike Junior, Kenneth had always loved wildlife. He found animals fascinating and imagined his future children exploring the land, building forts, and using nature as their playground. Junior, on the other hand, harbored a deep distrust of animals. If questioned, he would insist his aversion was purely about hygiene, though his conviction suggested he had once been personally wronged by a beloved pet. A surprise feature in the backyard was a large wooden shed, spacious enough to house 2 John Deere machines. Positioned on the far left, reaching it required walking across the entire backyard. The photos on Ms. Leon's desk made it clear the shed would require upkeep. But Kenneth didn't care. The house itself was a semi-massive two-story home with 5 bedrooms, 4 bathrooms, wooden floors, a finished basement with heated floors, and a fully updated kitchen. This was it, his dream home. He knew he would have to sell his current house to make the deal work, but that didn't deter him. He had never felt attached to his present home and was more than ready to move on. While Kenneth made his financial decisions independently, he was deeply family-oriented. He had long since learned that life was easier when he at least pretended to seek his family's input, even when his mind was already made up. Ms. Leone's desk had earned the nickname The Highway due to her speed in closing foreclosure deals. She was once rumored to have sold 9 homes between 8 a.m. and 11:40 a.m. in a single morning. With that reputation in mind, Kenneth waited outside her office, determined to act quickly. "Morning, handsome," Leone greeted as she approached her office, her floral dress swaying with each step. "Morning, Leone. Got a few minutes?" With dramatic flair, she tossed her wavy brown hair back. "Ooh, my! Have you been waiting for me? This must be my lucky day." She giggled as she walked inside, clearly enjoying the attention. Now seated across from her, Kenneth sipped his coffee, prompting Leone to mimic him playfully. Kenneth was well aware of Leone's interest in him. She had made it clear she wanted more than just a working relationship. While he found her attractive, he adhered to his rule: never mix work with romance. If he ever broke that rule, Leone would be the one to make him reconsider. She was single, didn't care for nightlife, and possessed a beauty that wasn't fragile. She had grown up on a ranch. More importantly, she was family-oriented, a quality Kenneth valued deeply. He had once drunkenly admitted as much at a staff party, a confession Leone never forgot. Now, as she studied him with keen interest, he knew she would use this opportunity to probe for any cracks in his carefully maintained wall of professionalism. But he wanted that house, and he was prepared to use whatever leverage he had. "Spit it out, Ken." "What's on your mind?" she finally asked, breaking the silence. "That file right there," he said, pointing to the Emmett Road folder. "I want it. Can you delay posting it for a few hours so my agent can confirm I can offload my current place?" Leone scrunched her nose, a telltale sign of hesitation. She picked up the file and examined it. "It's a nice property, but foreclosure homes usually come with baggage. Are you sure you don't want something you can vet properly?" Kenneth leaned forward. "I know it's a risk, but it feels right, Lee." He used the nickname deliberately, knowing it would sway her. As expected, she lit up, her excitement evident. "Well, Ken, I had to give you the caution speech, but I think this is a great move. You might not even need to sell your house. I'll just need you to sign some documents, and I'll handle the rest." She pulled out 2 forms. One states that you plan to rent out your current home as an additional income source. The other authorizes me to pull your financials and secure a loan for you. "You work fast," Kenneth remarked with a grin. By the next day, after all the right calls were made, Kenneth had the house pending final mortgage approval. Everything had fallen into place so seamlessly, it had to be fate. At 11:30 a.m., Kenneth officially became the owner of the 3-acre property. He was ecstatic, yet moments of anxiety crept in as he considered the responsibilities ahead. Leone, however, was more excited than anyone. She made her rounds in the office, proudly announcing Kenneth's purchase. Her enthusiasm was so palpable that some co-workers noted she occasionally referred to the deal as our house. Depending on who she spoke to, the phrasing shifted from "Kenneth just bought an amazing property" to "We just bought an amazing property." Sitting in his office, Kenneth barely registered the office gossip. He was about to call Junior, but his mind drifted to mundane concerns, cutting the grass and shoveling snow for a seemingly endless driveway. But none of it mattered. He had his dream home. Kenneth finally realized why the house had gone into foreclosure, and he almost laughed at himself for not listening when Leon had advised him to do his due diligence. He had made a critical mistake by not investigating the property's history. He could have at least inquired about past incidents related to the house. What if a crime had taken place there? Or worse, what if it required extensive repairs and was abandoned at a loss? These unsettling thoughts sent a chill down his spine. However, he reminded himself of Leon's affection for him. She would have certainly insisted on a thorough check, or at the very least, warned him if there had been a serious issue. Kenneth picked up his phone. After a brief hesitation, he dialed Leon's office. "Hey, Ken! Still excited?" She greeted cheerfully. "Yeah, still excitedly. I never imagined I'd own a place like this by morning." "Oh yes, you're now the proud owner and the proud bearer of a medium-sized mortgage too," she laughed. "So, how can I help you?" "Well, I'm about to check out the Emmett property and thought you might want to come along," he replied, trying to sound casual. He almost heard her shuffle in her chair before responding. "That sounds awesome. Did you call the real estate agent to meet us there?" "Yep, right before calling you. He's already on his way." "Perfect! Give me 5 minutes to close up. We're going for drinks after the viewing, okay?" Kenneth chuckled. "Sounds like a plan." But Leon had already hung up, too excited to wait. Upon arriving, Kenneth was convinced he had made the right choice. He couldn't recall the last time he'd had such a scenic drive. The only word that came to mind was green. The property was lush with overgrown grass and vibrant flowers. It felt like stepping into a fantasy meadow. "Maybe the house is in good condition," he mused, a hopeful smile forming. But the recurring question remained. Why had this property landed on Leon's desk? What was its story? "Here we go!" Leon exclaimed as he turned into the long driveway, about 20 yards in length. Kenneth already saw potential, lining the driveway with trees, upgrading the path, maybe even adding a fountain. His imagination ran wild for a moment. "No one's here," Leon noted, removing her glasses to reveal her sharp gray eyes. Kenneth frowned. "Not sure why the realtor isn't here yet." "Give me a second." He texted John Lee, the real estate agent. "Guess he's running late. Let's take a look around," Leon suggested, grabbing his hand and pulling him along. They strolled around the property, hand in hand. "This is beautiful," Kenneth murmured. "It really is. I'm so glad you bought it." "Yeah. It feels almost magical. Reminded me of meadows when we drove in." She looked around. "I see it." He halted. "Leon, what exactly led to this house being on the market?" She paused. The owner was a young man who worked at the Ottawa shelter. One day, he just disappeared, missing several payments. That sounds like the opening of a true crime documentary. Was he ever found? Leonie laughed, playfully nudging his arm. "Relax." Kenneth got the message and dropped the subject as John Lee's car pulled in. The flustered agent stumbled out, his gray suit jacket flapping in the breeze as he hurried over. "Apologies for my tardiness. Traffic issues." No worries, Kenneth said. We already toured the property. Then you're ready to see the inside. I assure you, it's as stunning as the exterior. John unlocked the door. The walkthrough exceeded Kenneth's expectations. The house was a steal. He found himself staring at the 80-inch TV mounted in the living room. Every feature is updated, and the appliances are state-of-the-art, John noted. Kenneth ran a hand over the leather couch. This furniture isn't from IKEA, he joked. Good eye. And the floors are heated. In the kitchen, Kenneth marveled at the open space. The appliances looked untouched, the pantry and cupboards fully stocked. Was the owner preparing to bunker down before he vanished? Everything's pristine, Leon voiced his thoughts. John handed over the keys and left, leaving an awestruck Kenneth and an exuberant Leon. Her eyes gleamed as she stared at him, as though he were the answer to all her problems. Kenneth was too overwhelmed by his luck to notice the shift in her demeanor. "Yo, Leon, this was an amazing deal," he said, mildly bouncing with excitement. "Oh, yes. You should move in immediately and rent out the old place. I know someone who can find a tenant within a week." She spun toward him suddenly. "I love this house, Kenneth. I'll plan the housewarming party." And just like that, she was hooked. A modern-day way of marking her territory. "Sure. You plan the party, and I'll move in within a week. But I'll have an inspector check for hidden issues first." Before Kenneth could finish, Leon had already grabbed his arm and the house keys. "Okay, buddy, let's grab that drink and start planning." She was more excited than the homeowner himself. Before shutting the door, Kenneth took one last look at the house. A broad, genuine smile spread across his face, the widest Leon had ever seen. Leon had worked at the bank before Kenneth joined. She had shown him the ropes, helped him with finances, and guided him on credit and investment strategies. She had been eyeing him for a while, and now she could sense his guard lowering. Seizing the moment, she squeezed his hand just enough for him to notice. He responded with a sly smile and wink. That was it, the final crack in the dam. Kenneth had unknowingly given Leon the green light. The chase was on. Finding tenants for his old house took longer than expected. Instead of 1 week, Kenneth moved in 3 weeks after getting the keys. Junior, his brother, didn't share the excitement. He had only been informed after the fact, and made his disapproval clear. But despite his grievances about the location and wildlife, he not only helped with the move, but also organized the truck rental and movers. Leon, upon learning that Junior had hired movers, meticulously planned the entire move. Each box was labeled with a room and precise placement instructions. By noon, everything was unpacked and in order, far quicker than Kenneth's usual procrastination-prone approach. Leon's grand housewarming bash had gradually been reduced to a small barbecue with close friends and family. Kenneth had initially resisted, preferring solitude, but Leon had persistently negotiated a compromise. Despite Kenneth's reluctance, the BBQ was a success. Guests were amazed by the house, much to the pride of Junior and Leon. For Junior, it was about family status. For Leon, it was about her perceived role in making it all happen. She and Junior had even invited more guests than Kenneth had approved. Still, the evening was a blast. Food, music, laughter, and in classic Junior fashion, some mischief. Halfway through the night, he was caught nearly getting intimate with his date in the laundry room during one of Kenneth's house tours. Here's your passage, rewritten with improved accuracy, grammar, and clarity, while maintaining the original style, length, and word choices. Kenneth and Leone's lingering glances were the most telling part of the night. Their mutual awareness of it was immediate and undeniable. Ever since the house purchase, the tension between them had escalated to a fever pitch, each gaze carrying the weight of unspoken but undeniable thoughts and desires. Kenneth was still fighting it. Though he was consumed by the thrill of buying his dream home at such a young age and the realization that he now owned 2 properties, he remained determined to keep his resolve. Yet for reasons beyond his understanding, the moment softened him. Without realizing it, he had already let Leone in. As the night drew to a close and guests trickled out one by one, it became clear, to Kenneth and to everyone else, that Leone intended to stay, or at the very least, be the last to leave. She busied herself with cleaning, collecting dishes, and bidding farewell to guests, as if she were the host. Kenneth didn't mind. Not tonight. Junior and his new girlfriend were among the last to go. Standing at the front door at 10 p.m., Junior glanced over at Leone, diligently washing dishes, then back at Kenneth with a knowing smirk. "Have a fun night, bro." Kenneth scoffed, though the small smile creeping onto his face betrayed him. "It's not like that," he said, shutting the door behind them. With the living room still littered with empty boxes, the back deck felt like the perfect escape. It came fully furnished, deck couches with plush cushions and soft lighting strung around the perimeter, creating a warm, intimate glow. It was an ideal setting. The low seating naturally caused Leone's already short dress to ride even higher on her thighs, the golden bulbs casting a warm, sun-kissed sheen on her skin. With each shift and adjustment, they found playful excuses to close the space between them. Kenneth thought to himself, Leone was stunning. Yes, she worked at his office, but what was the worst that could happen? Leone bit her glossy lip, sensing the inevitable. The entire office already assumed they were dating, so why was he still fighting it? What was the point? She was right there, legs curled up on the cushion, sipping her beer, gazing at him like a treat she was waiting for permission to indulge in. It didn't take long before they were fully entwined, arms wrapped around each other, beers in hand. The only thing missing was a thick, cozy blanket. A rustling sound from the backyard snapped Kenneth's attention away. He ignored it at first, assuming it would pass. But when the noise grew louder and closer, both he and Leone sat up, their eyes locked on the tree line. The movement suddenly stopped. Kenneth held his breath, leaning forward, squinting into the darkness. Then, relief. Two small fawns stumbled onto the grass, playfully frolicking. For the first time, Kenneth took in the true beauty of his new home. The moonlight, veiled by the towering trees, mixed with the golden glow of the deck lights, casting a dreamlike haze over the yard. It was a picturesque view, save for the old, decrepit wooden shed in the distance. Leone was entranced. A sight like this could melt even the coldest heart, she thought. She gently set her beer down on the patio stool, then, slowly, deliberately, reached for Kenneth's face, pulling him into a kiss. He welcomed it eagerly. Kenneth was beyond return. His hand slid to the back of her neck, pulling her closer, while the other wandered down her body. They lost themselves in the moment, tangled together on the deck couch for a few heated minutes, before deciding to move the night's activities indoors. "We should probably watch where we're going," Kenneth muttered as they fumbled toward the door, still locked in each other's embrace. "I'm sure we'll survive," Leone teased, tugging him inside by the collar of his shirt. Kenneth turned to shut the back door when movement in the distance caught his eye. Just beyond the first few trees, separating his yard from the vast forest land, a massive, dark shape shifted. His pulse spiked. In his current state, drunk on excitement, anticipation, and beer, he chalked it up to a trick of the eye, a fleeting illusion brought on by the rush of blood away from his brain. "Hey, Ken, you coming?" Leone's voice rang from the bedroom, filled with anticipation. Kenneth smirked. "Yeah, I'm coming." But as he reached to close the curtains, he froze. It was real. Standing in the yard, as unmoving as the towering trees, was the largest white-tailed deer Kenneth had ever seen. His breath hitched. The animal bore the features of a deer, but its sheer size was staggering. Nearly 7 feet tall, its antlers spanned as wide as its own body, its midsection thick and muscular, closer to a fully grown workhorse than any deer he had ever encountered. Its legs were powerful, unnaturally furred, and hefty beyond reason. The two locked eyes. Steam curled from its nostrils with each heavy breath. Under the moonlight and the glow of the deck lights, its eyes burned a deep, haunting burgundy. Kenneth stood frozen. He knew instinctively that this creature was not to be provoked. Its overgrown, dark fur was matted in thick, tangled knots, making it appear either drenched or simply unkempt. Then, in a reckless surge of bravado, or sheer stupidity, Kenneth flung open the deck door and slammed it shut in an attempt to scare the beast off. For a split second, it worked. But then, the buck charged. Kenneth's heart lurched into his throat as the massive creature galloped, not toward the trees, but toward the deck. Panic surged through him like a live wire. "Oh, shit!" he blurted, scrambling to lock the door and yank the curtains shut. A heavy thud reverberated from the deck. "It's attacking the house," he thought, pulse hammering. Then, silence. Kenneth hesitated before peeking through the curtain. The beast was gone, slipping back into the trees as if it had never been there at all. His legs nearly gave out beneath him. Shaken, he turned away, his mind racing. What the hell was that thing? This wasn't normal. He couldn't just ignore it. A fence wouldn't stop something that size. He needed a plan. But right now, a beautiful woman was waiting for him in his bed, and that was the only problem he was willing to deal with tonight. Pushing the encounter aside, he retreated to his room. The sounds of community droned from the TV, signaling Leone's boredom in his absence. As he drifted off beside her, he realized tonight had been one of the most intense, emotionally charged nights he had ever shared with a woman, and he had plenty to compare it to. The next morning, he recounted his tale of the now 8-foot, 600-pound buck, exaggerated for effect. After some laughs and playful debate over its true size, they agreed it was likely a one-off occurrence. If it wasn't, Leone had a simple solution. "Well, Ken, if you're going to live in the boonies like a redneck, you might as well start doing redneck things, like owning a few shotguns." Kenneth laughed, sheepishly admitting he'd never fired a gun before. By the end of breakfast, they had plans to visit the shooting range next weekend. Leone left, but not before giving him a long, lingering kiss, one that left his skin buzzing long after she was gone. Kenneth felt euphoric. His usual instinct to analyze worst-case scenarios had abandoned him. But as the excitement settled, reality crept back in. Alone in his house for the first time, he walked through every room, breathing it in, letting the weight of his accomplishment settle. Stepping outside, he wandered his property, observing every detail, when a small voice called out, "Hello!" Kenneth turned to see two toddlers waving from the yard next door. He smiled and waved back. Almost instantly, a large, heavy-set woman appeared, scooping the children up without so much as a greeting. She hurried inside, leaving Kenneth standing there. Odd. But he was too high on life to care. Barely 5 minutes into his walk around, Kenneth was interrupted yet again as a black Range Rover, followed closely by a small black van, pulled up through the short driveway and stopped directly in front of him. He stood frozen in place, cup of coffee still in hand, his expression betraying his confusion at the sight of the unfamiliar vehicles in his driveway. 2 men stepped out of the Range Rover, followed by 3 more from the van. Dressed in black and thuggish in appearance, they carried an air of quiet intimidation. The exception was a passenger from the Range Rover, who exuded a different kind of presence, an ego-driven yet refined gangster aesthetic. His black 3-piece suit was impeccably tailored, and a long, thin wool coat draped over his shoulders as if permanently affixed. Towering at 7'3", his build resembled that of a CrossFit athlete, evident even beneath the layers of his suit. His stature alone commanded attention, or, at the very least, a wary eye. It was clear he was the one calling the shots. Yet as this imposing figure strode toward him, Kenneth's thoughts focused on a singular question. What do they want? "Hello, sir. Are you the new owner of the house?" the man asked, extending a hand toward Kenneth. Kenneth looked up at the towering figure. Shifting his coffee cup to his other hand, he accepted the handshake. "Yes, I am. But who's asking?" Kenneth replied. With a seemingly friendly smile that somehow unsettled him, the man responded, "Oh, my apologies. I'm Igor. Sorry for dropping in unannounced, but I only found out about my cousin's disappearance 2 days ago. By the way, did you know Peter?" "No. Who's Peter?" Kenneth asked, now fully engaged in the conversation, as he realized he might learn something new about the house's previous owner. "Yeah. Peter and my cousin owned this house before you. So, you can imagine my surprise when I heard it had already been sold. You guys move quickly, huh?" Igor said, leaning forward and tapping Kenneth's shoulder in an almost friendly manner. Kenneth responded with a sly, slightly guilty smile, laced with a hint of pride. "Yeah, sorry about that. I heard these properties go fast once they hit the market. So fast that sometimes even family members don't get a chance to buy them. But how can I help you?" "We just need to grab some barrels of fertilizer I stored at the back of the shed. Well, not exactly the back, more like a few yards into the forest. If you don't mind, my guys will go collect them, and we'll be out of your hair in under 10 minutes, Igor said, his tone leaving little room for negotiation. Out of the corner of his eye, Kenneth noticed the neighbor from earlier, still standing in front of her house, watching them intently. He had moved away from the city to avoid such nosy behavior, yet at this moment he felt oddly reassured by her presence. His visitors neither seemed nor looked friendly, and his gut told him that these so-called barrels of fertilizer were anything but. He had a choice: stand his ground, refuse their request, and face the unknown consequences of such defiance, or allow them to retrieve whatever they had left behind and avoid unnecessary conflict. Opting for the path of least resistance, he nodded his approval. After 30 minutes, the 4 men emerged from the forest, dragging rusted metal barrels streaked with a greenish liquid that had clearly been leaking or poorly handled. They had the decency to cover the barrels with a large brown top, but they had rushed the job. One corner remained exposed, revealing a glimpse of the rusted metal. Faint, scratched letters spelled out FENTANYL. Kenneth kept Igor engaged in idle conversation, talking about everything and nothing, just enough to prevent him from wandering further onto the property. When the barrels finally reached the front of the house, Kenneth caught a clearer look at the faded lettering. Igor did too. With a slow, deliberate motion, he stepped forward, unfolded the top, and exposed the barrels completely. Then, with an eerie smile that sent a chill down Kenneth's spine, he turned back to his previous stance. "Can't get good help these days, right? And you sure can't get fertilizer like this cheap anymore, you know what I mean?" Igor remarked, studying Kenneth's face for any reaction. Kenneth, forcing himself to remain composed, replied almost mechanically, "Yeah, I guess. Nothing's cheap these days." He mirrored Igor's sly smile, though his discomfort was growing. These men fit the mold of career criminals, and while he knew he had every right to kick them off his property, he also knew that would be the wrong move. He had quickly connected the dots. This wasn't just about some barrels, and he needed to tread carefully. First, the beast from last night. Now, a group of men hauling barrels of fentanyl from his backyard. Or rather, from the woods behind it. But still, his new house was rapidly turning into an unwanted mystery box. "So, do you know what happened to your cousin?" Kenneth asked, attempting to redirect the conversation. "All the banks told me when I inquired was that the previous owner just vanished." Igor's tense demeanor softened, his shoulders relaxed, and in a thick Russian-Canadian accent he chuckled. "My man, they told you the same thing they told me. He just disappeared, stopped showing up to work. Even Ms. Fairbanks, your new neighbor, claims she hasn't seen him in months." He nodded toward the woman's house. "Oh, her name's Fairbanks?" Kenneth asked, now more engaged. "Yeah, but she's a crazy bitch," Igor spat, turning to face Kenneth directly. "Anyway, Kenneth, the barrels are loaded up, and it's time for us to get out of your space." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a business card. "If you ever need anything, advice, a message sent, don't hesitate to reach out," Igor said, winking as he handed over the card. "Thanks again for making this process an easy one," he added, patting Kenneth's shoulder before heading to the Range Rover. "No problem, Igor. It was your cousin's property after all. I'll be sure to reach out if I need anything," Kenneth said, holding the card up mockingly as the vehicles backed out of his driveway. Once they disappeared, Kenneth turned to go back inside, only to notice Miss Fairbanks still watching, hands firmly on her hips. He gave her a friendly wave. Without hesitation, she responded with a middle finger before storming into her house. Kenneth, maintaining his composure, simply smiled, lowered his hand, and walked inside. He packed away the last of his things, his mind replaying the past 2 days. The beast from last night still haunted him. A lifelong animal lover, he respected nature. But whatever he had seen wasn't to be respected. It was to be feared. His memory of its dark, overgrown fur and what he swore was a triple horn sent shivers down his spine. Then there was the morning's ordeal. If he had refused Igor's request, things could have gone very differently. And Miss Fairbanks, what was her deal? Had her middle finger been directed at him or Igor? One thing was clear. He needed to smooth things over. A peace offering. Cake? Number. After seeing her unruly kids, he settled on a better choice. 2 good bottles of wine. Later that afternoon, He approached her house, knocking on the door. Before he could even ring the bell, she was already opening it. "What do you want?" she snapped. Taken aback, Kenneth stammered, "Hello, ma'am." "I'm Kenneth, the new neighbor. Just wanted to drop off a little gift." She glared at the bottles, arms crossed. Bribery already. "You and your drug dealer friends should know. I won't hesitate to call the cops this time." Kenneth spoke with such passion and assertiveness that Miss Fairbanks's expression shifted from suspicion to one of guilt and remorse. "So, yeah, I'm sorry to disappoint you." Kenneth smiled as he gestured lightly at the wine bottles he still held. "But I'm no drug dealer, just a banker who got lucky with a good deal. And before you call me a liar about the fertilizer, you're right. It seems the last owner was indeed a drug dealer, because those barrels they took from my backyard, if I'm not mistaken, were filled with fentanyl." "What? Are you sure it was fentanyl?" exclaimed Miss Fairbanks, now fully engaged, leaning forward with fascination. "Yeah, I read it on the barrels." The words were scratched up, but it was clear enough. "And I've never heard of a green liquid fertilizer," Kenneth replied. "I'll help you with those." Ms. Fairbanks, now smiling, gently took the bottles from Kenneth's hands and placed them on a table just inside her front door. "Thanks for the wine, and sorry for jumping to conclusions. But why didn't you call the cops on them, especially if you knew what was in those barrels?" "I would have called immediately." "Well, you're braver than I am, Ms." Kenneth trailed off, realizing he hadn't caught her name. "Sorry, mine's Kenneth. Kenneth Bossa." "Oh, sorry. I'm Brigitte Fairbanks, but feel free to call me Brigitte," she said. "Well, that's a lovely name. As I was saying, the last thing I'd do is get between drug dealers and their stash. It was safer to stay quiet and let them take their stuff and leave my property for good. No fuss, no violence." Kenneth continued with a confidence that barely masked his unease. "Yeah, I guess you have a point," Brigitte admitted. "So, you're saying we shouldn't see those shady people around here anymore, right?" "Yes, at least I hope not. And before I go, last night I saw the biggest buck ever in my backyard. It charged at my deck." "Is that normal around here?" he asked animatedly. Before Brigitte could respond, he continued, "This thing was massive, about 7 or 8 feet long, with black fur that almost touched the ground. Its antlers were huge, almost like they'd been sharpened on purpose. And its eyes, they looked blood red, but that might have just been the lighting." Brigitte's face shifted to one of worry and annoyance as she sighed audibly. "What's wrong?" Kenneth asked. "Oh, nothing. Just one of those things you wish you hadn't heard," she muttered before continuing. "This will change how many of us in the neighborhood live our lives." "Wait, so this isn't new?" Kenneth asked, now intrigued. "No, it's not new. But if I had to guess, you saw big old Charlie. He's been a menace around here for years, but no one's seen him in over a year. We thought he was dead. Kenneth, he's wild. You should stay away from him." "Do you have a gun?" she asked suddenly. "No, I don't." "Why would I need one?" Kenneth responded. "Well, you don't need one, but I'd strongly suggest getting one soon. That deer likes your yard because of the forest behind it. That makes you a target for Charlie. Trust me, you'll want one after you see him up close." "What do you mean, after I see him up close? I saw him last night." "Not up close, but close enough to know that thing is terrifying. I'm surprised it hasn't been killed yet. It should be in the Guinness Book of Records or something, Kenneth said. Sensing the conversation shifting toward firearms, Kenneth took a step toward the porch, signaling his intent to leave. Brigitte mirrored his movement, stepping back toward her door, hand resting on the knob. "Well, Kenneth, right?" she asked. "Yes, it's Kenneth. Just don't get too close to that thing if you see him again. And seriously, think about getting a gun. I have 2 hunting rifles here. Better to have one and not need it than the other way around, right?" "Got it," Kenneth replied as he walked down the porch. "It was nice meeting you, Ms. Fairbanks. I'm planning a barbecue soon. You and the kids are invited." He waved as he stepped away. "Sounds good, Kenneth. Thanks for the wine. And buy a gun," she called out with a grin, before closing her door. Kenneth chuckled, watching her wave him off. Her smile was genuine, and that gave him some peace of mind. She had believed his stories about the insane buck and the barrels of fentanyl. He had managed to win over at least one neighbor, and that was a victory. However, the talk of guns, and Charlie sent a cold sweat trickling down Kenneth's back as he settled in for his second night in his new home. He lay in bed staring at the ceiling, a steak knife carefully placed on his bedside table. His pitiful line of defense against the infamous Charlie. Kenneth laughed at himself. A steak knife. Against that beast? Ridiculous. But somehow, having it nearby brought a false sense of security, one he welcomed. His third night passed uneventfully. He started forgetting about Charlie, though he never moved the knife from his bedside. It had found its permanent place, offering him a strange sense of comfort. Then came the 4th night. At 3 a.m., a loud bang from the backyard jolted Kenneth awake. He sat frozen at the edge of his bed, holding his breath. He prayed it was just the wind rattling some loose wood. Then came a second bang. Louder, followed by a third. This time, the unmistakable sound of breaking wood. Kenneth shot to his feet, nausea building in his stomach. He rushed to the kitchen, completely forgetting about the knife. With a burst of misplaced bravado, he gripped the doorknob, yanked the blinds open, and slapped the light switch. The backyard flooded with light. There stood big old Charlie. The massive buck locked eyes with Kenneth through the glass doors, its crimson gaze unyielding. In a foolish attempt to scare it off, Kenneth slammed the door. The noise did nothing. Charlie took a slow step toward the deck. Panic surged through Kenneth. He grabbed the closest object, a jar of pickled vegetables, and hurled it at the beast. The jar shattered against Charlie's forehead. Pickle juice and blood dripped down its face. But the buck didn't even flinch. It just kept advancing. Kenneth barely had time to slam and lock the door before sprinting to his bedroom. His heart pounded. This wasn't normal. This wasn't a deer. It was a force of nature, and it had its sights set on him. Then came the shattering of glass. Charlie was inside. Kenneth's breath hitched. Frozen with fear, he heard the beast's hooves clatter against his kitchen floor. He forced his legs to move, dashing into his closet and cracking the door open just enough to see. Charlie moved deliberately, not clumsily. It navigated the house with purpose. This wasn't an animal. It was a predator. Kenneth gripped his knife. His mind raced. He remembered a Joe Rogan interview. Some hunter had talked about the best place to stab a deer, just behind the front leg, where the heart was. Charlie's eye met Kenneth's through the crack in the closet door. The beast slammed a hoof down, shaking the floor. Kenneth didn't think. He acted. He burst from the closet, knife in hand, throwing all his weight into the stab. The blade sank into Charlie's side. Kenneth shoved harder, feeling it pierce deep into the flesh. The buck thrashed violently, blood spraying everywhere. Kenneth held on for dear life. And Charlie wasn't done yet. Kenneth was slammed by Charlie's weight, sending him hurtling into the wall beside the closet. The impact knocked the air out of his lungs. He scrambled to his feet, his body battered and bruised, drenched in Charlie's blood. His eyes darted around the room for an escape route, and he spotted one. The bedroom door was wide open. Charlie was too preoccupied thrashing around to notice him. Kenneth had managed to strike a vital point. He was sure of it. But he wasn't about to stick around to see if Charlie would go down for good. He bolted for the door, slipping out before old, bloodied Charlie could react. He dashed out of the house, sprinting toward the main road. It was pitch dark, the streetlights non-existent. Barefoot, his soaked shirt clung to his body as the cold wind bit into his skin. It wasn't until he was halfway down the road that he realized where he was heading, straight for Miss Fairbanks's house. As he neared, the reality of his situation hit him like a freight train. He hadn't been home in over a week, and now here he was, at 3 a.m., about to ring his unsuspecting neighbor's doorbell looking like something straight out of a horror movie. Before he could press the doorbell, Ms. Fairbanks swung the door open from the inside, her shotgun leveled at him. Her expression could melt steel. Her demeanor, however, shifted almost instantly. Her eyes scanned his hollowed-out features and his blood-soaked clothes. Concern replaced anger. "What happened? Are you okay?" she demanded, her voice sharp with urgency. Kenneth, still in a daze, couldn't tear his eyes away from the shotgun. "No, I was attacked. Charlie broke into my house. Sorry for bothering you, but can I use your phone to call the cops?" He shivered as the frigid night air lashed at his exposed skin. "Of course." "Come in," she said, stepping aside to let him through. She looked him over again. "Where's all this blood from? Are you hurt?" Kenneth sank to the floor, leaning against the doorframe. He no longer cared about the state of his clothes. He was safe. In a stranger's house, yes, but safe. "No, I'm not injured," he exhaled. "I stabbed him with a steak knife before I ran out." "This is all his blood." Ms. Fairbanks stared at him, a mix of astonishment and unease flickering across her face. "Wait! He came into your room?" Kenneth simply nodded. "Jesus. So is Charlie dead? Or you didn't stick around to check, huh?" "No, I don't think he's dead," Kenneth muttered, glancing at his blood-soaked clothes. "But I hit him good. Can I use your phone to call the cops?" Ms. Fairbanks hesitated, then sighed. "Yeah, about that. Before we do, I don't think it's a good idea." Kenneth frowned. "Why not?" "Well, Kenneth, earlier today, you saw guys hauling 3 barrels of fentanyl out of your backyard, something you had no idea was even there. Now, you want the cops to come over and find you covered in blood with a possibly dead buck in your house. Think before you call. We should check your place first. If Charlie's still there, we'll finish the job." She slung the rifle over her shoulder and pulled on a pair of boots. Kenneth struggled to his feet. "You think I could get in trouble for defending myself?" "Not necessarily," she admitted. "But then again, I'm not sure. And Charlie was an endangered species. You really want to end up on the news for this?" She stepped out first, leading the way. Kenneth followed, still rattled but oddly reassured by her confidence. As they walked back to his house, he recounted the entire night to her, He found comfort in how prepared she was. She held her rifle like she knew exactly how to use it, her flashlight guiding their way through the darkness. She briefly regretted not offering him shoes or a jacket, but when she considered the blood, her guilt faded. She kept her focus on the task ahead, listening intently as Kenneth relived his nightmare. Once they arrived, they were met with a gruesome sight. Blood was smeared across the floors, trailing from the master bedroom to the kitchen. Moving cautiously, Miss Fairbanks led the way, rifle raised. Charlie was nowhere to be found, but his presence was undeniable. His blood was everywhere. The trail led outside, through the deck, and into the forest. Kenneth hesitated, but Miss Fairbanks showed no fear, only curiosity. Emboldened by her resolve, he pressed on. They followed the blood for about 15 yards before they found him. Charlie lay on the ground, bloodied and heaving, unable to move anything but his eyes. He didn't look at them with defiance or rage, just fear and pain. He was dying, and it was slow. Without a word, Miss Fairbanks knelt beside him, running her fingers over his forehead in a soothing motion. Then she handed Kenneth the rifle, her expression saying everything. Kenneth hesitated, then took the gun, raising it with shaking hands. Just as he was about to pull the trigger, a rustling sound echoed from the trees. Ms. Fairbanks took a cautious step back. Kenneth fired. The gunshot rang through the forest, leaving his ears ringing and his hands trembling. But even through the noise, they could hear it, the rustling growing louder. As the ringing subsided, they saw them. Deer, bucks, fawns. Emerging from the darkness, dozens of them, watching. Ms. Fairbanks, usually composed, clutched Kenneth's hand. This wasn't normal. It wasn't natural. Kenneth's grip tightened on the rifle as he pulled her closer. Now seems like a good time to call the cops. Yeah, and what do we even tell them? She whispered back, without sounding insane. The scene was surreal, hauntingly beautiful, yet heavy with an eerie weight. Did they know Charlie had just died? Were they here to mourn, to protect their fallen leader? Questions swirled in Kenneth's mind. They couldn't stay. Slowly they backed away, keeping their eyes locked on the herd. Back at his bloodied house, Kenneth thanked Ms. Fairbanks and walked her home. He felt oddly confident now, as if he had just returned from a victorious battle. By morning, he debated whether to call the cops or animal control to remove Charlie's corpse. But when he learned disposal would cost over $1,500, he decided to handle it himself. Dressed warmly, armed with night lamps, water bottles, and a shovel, he returned to the forest. As he dug, he felt something unexpected, a sense of duty, even respect. Charlie had attacked him, yes, but he was still a creature deserving of dignity, and he wasn't alone. The deer remained at a distance, silent observers of the burial. By the time he finished, dawn had broken. He knelt beside the grave in silence. To his astonishment, the deer did the same. One by one, they bowed their heads, paying their respects before vanishing into the woods. In the weeks that followed, Kenneth discovered bundles of cash hidden in his walls, evidence that the previous owner had been a drug dealer. He took it all, using it only for cash purchases. That morning, he made a vow. He would never sell his house. He would protect the forest. And every summer, the deer returned, showcasing their newborn fawns. He never fed them, never tried to touch them, but both sides knew. They shared a mutual respect. Hope you enjoyed this short story from the Unseen City. Salazar's Touch Volume 1. I took great pleasure in writing these stories, and though riddled in fiction and creativity, I owe the city Ottawa for its inspiration and its disposition.